They're hiding behind generalities. Oh, we've got to get our fiscal house in order. We've got to rein in out of control Washington spending. It's all nonsense. It's all behind a veil, all obfuscation. None of it's real. None of it's out in the open.
Let's talk about this debt deal. We'll get to that before we talk to Adolph Reed Jr. Really excited for that. Conversation later on in the show. He's coming on at 9:45, right? That's
right.
When we have him scheduled. Great. So yeah, yesterday the debt limit deal was signed by the president, is my understanding. And before we dive into like what that means, it's really important to understand that none of this charade was necessary. The president did not have to pretend that he was bound by the debt limit. That was totally an unnecessary political theater. Now, of course, they would have had to go through a budget negotiation at some point, but that's totally different than this pressure that the president pretended was on him. The executive branch is obligated by the Constitution to pay debts that he is directed to pay by Congress. So, in order to buy, and there is a law that says that there's a debt limit and the president can't spend over this debt limit. And so, in order to abide by that law, he would have to violate the Constitution in one way or another. Either he would just totally stop paying debts, paying for services that Congress ordered him to pay, right, in previous budgets and previous laws that they passed. He's been ordered to pay that, or he would have to, as the executive branch, decide what he pays and what he doesn't, which amounts to a line item veto, which the Supreme Court has also said is unconstitutional, right? So, to abide by the debt limit, he would have to violate the Constitution. And that's the end of it. That's the end of it. And that's a fact. You cannot argue against that. To abide by the debt limit, in the case where Congress authorizes spending above the debt limit, he would have to violate the Constitution of the United States. So this is all not necessary. It's political theater. It's kabuki. It's fake. The debt limit is fake. It's unconstitutional.
Right. Yeah. I think it's important that you open there because President Biden did have options beyond this hostage negotiation process that Republicans love to engage in. You had the 14th Amendment. You have the possibility of minting the $1 trillion coin that I know folks have talked about, economists have talked about for quite some time. There were plenty of options. Also, let's remember that Democrats did hold a majority in Congress, and Bernie Sanders was one of the individuals who tried to get them to go ahead and take care of this debt limit back in, I believe it was December.
Right.
And, unfortunately, there were people such as, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, those types who, resisted. And so they couldn't get the votes.
Yeah. Well, and another group that has been agitating against the authority of the debt limit is a federal employee union, the SEIU's federal employee union, the National Association of Government Employees. And they are actually in court right now alleging that the debt limit is unconstitutional. And they say that they have standing because because theoretically, right, the debt limit was supposed to have been reached in January. So we're like well past when it was supposed to have been reached, but Janet Yellen and the Treasury Department have been playing these weird games. And one of the weird games that they've been playing is keeping cash on hand that is supposed to be going into federal employee pension funds. And now Janet Yellen and the Treasury Department says, oh, well, this money is going to go into the pension funds later as soon as this debt limit deal is resolved. But what happens in the interim, because we understand how interest works, right? Right. What happens in the interim is that the pension funds do not increase in value in the same way that they would have had the deposits been made in a timely fashion, in the time frame in which they were supposed to have been put in the pension funds. And so
Right.
federal employees were directly harmed by this, this BS, this fake nonsense. And so they allege that it's unconstitutional. And the Biden administration could have gone on the side of the plaintiff. They could have gone on record and said, you know what? The National Association of Government Employees is correct. We do believe that that limit is constitutional. And you could have had potentially a federal court issue a ruling saying as much. And then you could have gone to the Republicans and said, look, a federal court said it's unconstitutional. My hands are tied. Let's just get on with budget negotiation. But he didn't do that. He abstained from that. And so this is, it's absurd. It is absolutely absurd that the president and the Democrats are pretending that the debt limit is functional. Because it's not. It's unconstitutional. But okay, so all of that preamble aside, let's take a look at it. What are the broad strokes of the debt limit? Well, because defense and the military-industrial complex is magic, it is exempt and will continue to grow, which is weird because my understanding previously had been that they were going to cut the woke out of the military. And, I figured that there would be at least some woke in the military that you could cut in the budget, but apparently what happened is Republicans, they searched line item through the Defense Department and said, you know what, actually we can't find any woke to cut. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to give you a raise instead of cutting. I've also been told that the Republicans are the new anti-war party. That's
really?
Something else that I've been told. Yeah, that's another
News
thing.
to me.
That's another thing that I've been told. But instead of that, they are voting to increase defense spending yet again. While everything else is capped at fiscal year 23 levels. Now, to be sure, this is better than the original Republican proposal, which, let's remember, was a 22% cut across the board, again, to everything except defense. Which was bad, which was very bad, would have been very bad. But when you cap spending, when you freeze spending, particularly in a relatively high inflation environment, that means spending cuts. David Dayen puts it well in The American Prospect, saying that it will only be a little bit easier in the coming years to commit wage theft or to sell defective or poisoned products. It will only be a little harder to get rental assistance or tuition support. Only a few people will be freer to pollute the environment. Only a few will find it more difficult to get food. The Internal Revenue Service will only be a little worse, and a lot of things will stay the same. Almost nothing will get any better. So that's the deal. That's the thing that both sides could agree on. A little bit worse, nothing better. That's the thing. Could have been worse, but it's not good. Both sides are going to say it's not good, but it's worth taking a look at why both sides say it's not good, because I think it is revelatory.
Well, and I do want to push back just a sec to say that the Biden administration, I don't know. I've seen folks taking a victory leap here on behalf of Biden to say that he is some master negotiator and that this is just a hell of a deal. And so
you're right. When I say both sides, I mean the right of the Republican Party and the left of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Okay? So,
right.
But
the centrists got what they wanted, basically.
Yes. Yeah. So the Kevin McCarthy's and the Bidens are going to say that this is a good deal. Look at how compromised and professional we are. Wowee. But, the right and the left, in broad strokes, are saying that this is a bad deal. So let's take a look at why they say it's a bad deal. Bernie Sanders on why he voted no. Let's be clear. The original debt ceiling legislation that Republicans passed in the House would have, over a 10-year period, decimated the already inadequate social safety net of our country and made savage cuts to the programs that working families, the children, the sick, the elderly, and the poor desperately need. The best thing to be said about the current deal on the debt ceiling is that it could have been much worse, which is absolutely true. Instead of making massive cuts to healthcare, housing, education, childcare, nutrition assistance, and other vital programs over the next decade, this bill proposes to make modest cuts to these programs over a 2-year period. I could not in good conscience vote for a bill that cuts programs for the most vulnerable while refusing to ask billionaires to pay a penny more in taxes. I could not in good conscience vote for a bill that makes it harder for working families to afford the outrageously high price of childcare, housing, and health care, while, by cutting IRS funding, actually make it easier for the wealthiest and most profitable corporations in America to cheat on their taxes. At a time when we spend more on the military than the next 10 nations combined, I could not, in good conscience, vote for a bill that increases funding for the bloated Pentagon and large defense contractors that continue to make huge profits by fleecing American taxpayers with impunity. Let us not forget that the Pentagon is the only federal agency that cannot pass an independent audit or account for trillions of dollars in spending. At a time when the pharmaceutical industry is charging the American people by far the highest price in the world for prescription drugs, I could not in good conscience vote for a bill that does nothing to take on the greed of the big drug companies that are bankrupting Medicare and cancer patients while spending tens of billions of dollars on stock buybacks and dividends. At a time when over 45 million Americans are drowning in student debt, I could not, in good conscience, vote for a bill that eliminates the moratorium on student loan payments that has been a lifeline to millions of working-class families during the pandemic. Deficit reduction cannot just be about cutting programs that working families, the children, the sick, the elderly, and the poor depend on. It must be about demanding that the billionaire class and the profitable corporations pay their fair share of taxes, reining in out-of-control military spending, saving Medicare tens of billions of dollars on prescription drugs, and ending billions of dollars in corporate welfare that goes to the fossil fuel industry and other corporate interests. Okay, so that's why Bernie Sanders says he's against the deal. These are not only is he going into broad strokes, he's laying out specifics of why he opposes it. He reckons there should be more money here, less money there. He's all explicit. His agenda is out in the open. So let's take a look at our congressman, Dale Strong, on why he voted against it. When I ran for Congress, one of my top priorities was to stop the out-of-control Washington spending. It's all obfuscation. And obviously that out-of-control Washington spending does not include the only federal department that can't pass an audit, the Pentagon. Tommy Tuberville said we need to do two things: stop the reckless spending and get our economy growing faster. This bill falls far short of accomplishing either of those objectives, and that is why I voted no. Katie Britt says decisive action and tough decisions are needed to finally get control of the wasteful government spending and put America's fiscal house in order. The thing that I want you to know about these two contrasting reasons of why people voted against the debt limit deal, is that Bernie Sanders is specific. He's not afraid of having his full agenda out there. He says, okay, let's talk about decreasing the deficit. Here's what I oppose. I oppose cuts to healthcare. I oppose cuts to childcare. I oppose cuts to education, etc. Here's what I am in favor of: taxing the wealthy, bringing down drug prices, making sure corporations pay taxes they are already obligated to pay but don't. I'm for decreasing the military budget. The Republicans are hiding behind the bush because they know their real agenda is unpopular. So instead of specifically saying, yes, I'm in favor of kicking off X hundreds of thousands of people off of their health care, instead of saying, I'm in favor of sentencing Y number of people to death because of their lack of health care, I'm in favor of making the wealthiest among us, who already pay less in taxes than many of you, pay even less. That's their real agenda, but they're not saying it. Instead of saying that, they're hiding behind generalities. Oh, we've got to get our fiscal house in order. We got to rein in out of control Washington spending. It's all nonsense. It's all behind a veil, all obfuscation. None of it's real. None of it's out in the open. And so those are things to consider. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.